The storm hit perdition before midnight, thick with wind, lightning, and a rawness that peeled the skin off bone. Thunder cracked across the black sky, like rifle fire, and the saloon lanterns guttered low behind rain-streaked windows. Inside, smoke curled from cigars and spilled whiskey, and 100 half-whispered lies hung thick in the air. Bo Ransom sat at the back table, brim of his hat pulled low, a whiskey sweating by his elbow. His long fingers toyed with the edge of a frayed, playing card as though it might cut him. He hadn't spoken in 3 hands. Hadn't needed to. He was watching. Across from him, Hank Veller shuffled with a grin too sharp for a man his age. A gold tooth glinted when he laughed, and his knuckles were scabbed from beating the ones who lost. Hank ran the Silver Buck Saloon, owned the brothel above it, and kept a crooked hand in nearly every trade east of Tucson. Tonight, though, his smile had an edge of desperation. The pot between them had grown ugly, dollars, deeds, and something else, something alive. The girl. She stood by the stairs, arms folded over a threadbare cotton dress that clung to her sharp shoulders. Red hair hung loose around her face, tangled and wild. Her eyes didn't flinch, even when men leered. Clara May, they called her. 16, maybe. A child with a woman's defiance. She belonged to no one. Which meant, in Hank's world, she belonged to him. Final hand, Hank said, spitting a toothpick onto the floor. All in. Bo didn't look at the pile. He looked at the girl. You sure about this? His voice was quiet, but it hit the table like a hammer. She ain't worth much, Hank shrugged, wiping sweat from his brow. But neither's that scrap of land you call a ranch. This way, one of us walks out with something useful. Bo could have walked away. Should have. But the storm outside was nothing compared to the one boiling in his chest. He saw the way Hank gripped Clara's arm too tight, the way she braced herself like she'd rather bite off her tongue than cry out. Bo saw that, and the scars on his own hands burned. He laid his last chip down. Deal. Cards flicked like blades. The crowd leaned in, breath held. Hank cursed first. Bo had the better hand. Barely. The saloon erupted in hoots and curses. Someone slammed a bottle. Hank stood, fury trembling through him, but he didn't draw. Not tonight. Not in front of a dozen witnesses, and certainly not against Bo Ransom, who had once cut down 3 Confederates with a broken saber and half a boot. Bo rose slow, turned to Clara. Get your things. She didn't move. I ain't yours, she said, chin high. Not now, not ever. Bo didn't blink. No, you ain't. But you ain't his anymore either. Hank snarled, but Bo was already walking. Clara followed a heartbeat later, out into the rain that hit the dirt like iron nails. The ride to the ranch was long and hard. Lightning lit up the trail, painting ghost-white shadows of mesquite and mule deer across the hills. Bo rode silent, reins loose in his hand. Clara rode behind him on the pack horse, soaked to the skin and shaking with cold. She didn't speak until they reached the edge of the dry creek. I don't need your pity, she said, voice hoarse. Ain't offering it. Then why take me? He slowed his horse to look back at her. Rain poured off the brim of his hat. Because I couldn't leave you with him. That's all. She said nothing after that. Not even when the wolves came. It happened fast. Too fast. Bo heard the first snarl just beyond the ridge. Then came the second, closer. The pack had caught their scent in the rain. Hungry, desperate. The lead wolf burst from the brush, gray, lean, teeth bared. Bo drew and fired. The crack echoed, but another leapt from the side. Claire screamed. The horse reared. She fell. Bo dropped from the saddle and fired again, hitting the second wolf square in the chest. The third circled wide. He turned to Clara, who was crawling through the mud, her leg twisted. Don't move, he said. She froze. The last wolf lunged. Bo met it midair with the butt of his rifle. The beast hit the ground in a heap. Then there was only the rain and Clara's sobbing. Bo knelt beside her. Her ankle was sprained, maybe broken. He hoisted her into his arms without a word. She flinched. You're not him, she whispered. No, he said. I'm not. By dawn, they reached the ranch. Miles of empty desert, one sloped barn, and a weather-worn cabin nestled beneath a rocky hill. The land was quiet, almost dead. It suited Bo just fine. He laid her on the cot by the fire, then left to tend the horses. When he came back, she was staring at the ceiling like it had answers he didn't. "You can stay until you're strong enough to leave," he said. "You'll work for your meals. Clean cook. Fair." "No touching?" she asked, eyes narrowing. His jaw tightened. "I'm not that man." "Everyone is," she said. Bo turned without a word and walked out. The next day, she tried to run. Left just before sunrise, limping into the hills with a stolen flask and one of his boots. Bo found her an hour later, crumpled by a cactus, ankle bleeding. She swung at him with a rock. He caught it gently. "Why'd you come after me?" "Because I said I would." She scowled. "You didn't." He gave a dry smile. "Didn't need to." He carried her again, despite her protests, despite her curses. She hit his chest with small fists until she ran out of breath. Then she cried, quiet, shaking sobs that twisted something in him he thought long dead. He laid her down, dressed her wound, and left her be. That night, the fire crackled low. Bo sat in the old rocking chair, oil lamp casting shadows on the wall. Clara stirred, eyes barely open. "You got family?" she asked. "No. Wife. Had one." "What happened?" "She died." Clara was silent a moment. Then, "You don't talk much." "I talk enough." She rolled to face the wall. "You ever want kids?" Bo didn't answer right away. The words sat like stone on his tongue. "Couldn't," he said at last. "Doctor said it was the war. Or the fever after." Clara didn't reply. The fire popped, and outside, a coyote howled somewhere in the dark. The days passed. Clara healed, slow and stubborn. She swept the porch, fed the chickens, patched holes in his shirts. Once, he caught her humming to a half-dead rose bush by the barn. When she noticed him watching, she scowled and kicked it. Bo started leaving his meals for her on the table, no questions. She began setting 2 plates. One morning, he found her in the barn, trying to saddle his horse. Her ankles still bandaged, her jaw tight with focus. "You planning on riding out?" She shook her head. "Figured I'd learn." Bo hesitated, then walked over and showed her how to cinch the strap. Her fingers brushed his. She didn't pull away. "You fight in the war?" she asked. He nodded. "You kill men?" "Yes." "You sorry?" He looked at her then, really looked. "Every day." She studied him, eyes sharp, then nodded like that made sense. That evening, they sat on the porch. Wind rolled over the hills, warm and dry. She pointed to a twisted tree near the fence line. "That one looks like it's dancing." Bo smiled. "It's been struck by lightning. Twice. Still standing." "Yeah." She looked at him. "Like you." He shook his head. "I don't know about that." But in her eyes, he saw something he hadn't seen in a long time. Not pity, not fear, just recognition. That night, while Bo chopped wood near the back of the barn, he paused. A rustle behind him. Not animal, not wind. He straightened, hand on his revolver. From the shadows, near the tree line, a flicker of movement. Someone was watching. He didn't give chase, just stood there, silent. Clara appeared in the doorway. "What is it?" "Nothing," he said. "Just ghosts." She frowned. "You believe in those?" "Sometimes." He walked back, his hand never leaving the grip of his pistol. Later, long after she fell asleep, Bo stood by the window. The desert was quiet again, too quiet, and in his gut he knew Hank Veller wasn't done. He looked down at the sleeping girl on the cot, tough, fragile, full of fire, and knew the storm was far from over. But for now, there was warmth in the cabin, the kind that came not from firewood, but from a presence, a life. And for the first time in years, Bo Ransom felt something he didn't quite recognize. Hope, even if it came from the unlikeliest hand he'd ever been dealt. The sun rose hard over Ransom's land, casting long shadows across the brittle earth. The desert held its breath that morning, windless and tense, as if it too knew the balance had shifted. Bo stood on the porch, sipping coffee gone cold, watching Clara stomp toward the barn with her fists balled and hair tangled like a fox caught in thorns. She kicked over the feed bucket. Corn scattered. I ain't some charity case, she muttered. Bo didn't move. Didn't say you were. You treat me like one. Always quiet. Always watchin'. Like I might break. He set the mug down. I treat you like someone who's seen too much too young. She froze at that, then snatched up the bucket and slammed it upright. Over the next few weeks, the ranch became a battleground of stubbornness and slow reckonings. Clara worked harder than any grown man Bo had hired, mending fences, digging post holes, even branding cattle with arms that trembled from heat. She bled, cursed, and kept on. Bo watched, always with quiet eyes, always from a distance. Something in her fight echoed things he couldn't name. She never asked for more than what she was given. But one night, he found her kneeling beside the bunkhouse, digging at the dry earth with bare hands. She looked up, dirt smeared on her face, and said, I just want to plant something that stays. Bo walked away before she could see what that did to him. The monsoon came early that year. Rains hit hard and sudden, beating the land like a drum. The dry creek swelled overnight. Bo needed supplies from town. Clara insisted on going with him. I ain't made of glass, she said, tying her hat tight beneath her chin. And I won't be left behind like some broken wheel. They set out before dawn, the trail thick with mud and rattling water beneath the canyon ridges. Bo drove the wagon, reins loose in hand. Clara rode shotgun, rifle across her lap. For a while, neither spoke. Why'd you name the ranch Lost Lantern? She asked finally. Bo's jaw worked before he answered. Wife and I lit a lantern in the window every night while I was off fighting. Said it'd guide me home. And it did. No, he said, voice like gravel. She died the week before I made it back. Fever took her. Clara didn't say anything, but her hand moved, slow and cautious, resting just an inch from his on the bench. Thunder cracked in the distance. The clouds thickened like bruises. We best turn around, Bo said, narrowing his eyes at the sky. They never got the chance. The river had risen fast. Too fast. By the time they reached the crossing, it was a churning wall of water, foam slapping the banks, trees ripped from their roots sailing past like driftwood. We go across now, we don't come back, Bo muttered. We got no choice. If we wait, we'll lose the trail to mud, Clara said. Bo studied her, saw the fear buried under grit. She was right, and that made it worse. They lashed down the barrels, tightened the reins, and drove in. The current hit them like a fist. The wagon pitched, hooves scrambled, water surged over the wheels. Clara screamed, Hold on. Bo shouted. The back wheel caught on a submerged rock. The whole rig jolted. Clara slipped, lost her grip, and vanished beneath the surface. Bo dove without thinking. The cold hit him like lead. His boots dragged through silt, arms cutting hard through the current. He caught sight of her dress, pale, twisting like a flag, just downstream. He grabbed her, pulled her up. She coughed water and clung to him, fingers digging into his coat. They dragged themselves to the opposite bank, heaving and soaked, the wagon lost to the current. Supplies gone. Horses gone. Only each other. Clara lay on the rocks, gasping. You came after me. Bo sat beside her, bleeding from a cut on his temple. Course I did. She looked at him, something breaking loose behind her eyes. No one's ever done that. He didn't speak, just took her hand and held it in silence. They spent the night under a rocky ledge, shivering. Bo built a fire with damp kindling, coaxed it to life with patience he didn't know he still had. Clara leaned into him, head against his shoulder. When I was little, my mama said men like you didn't exist anymore. Bo chuckled low. She was right. I'm just what's left. The next morning, they walked back, 12 miles through sand and stone, sun beating down, boots filled with gravel. They made it by dusk, burned and blistered, but alive. Clara limped into the cabin and collapsed onto the cot. Bo covered her with his coat and sat on the floor beside her. You mad? She asked through cracked lips. No, he said. Proud. She laughed, dry and strange. Don't say that. I'll start crying. That night, they slept without a fire, and it was the first time Bo didn't feel alone in his own home. But peace was a fragile thing in perdition. Hank Veller came riding 3 days later. Bo was out back, hammering a loose fence post when the dust cloud rose on the horizon. 3 riders, 1 wagon. Hank led the pack, grinning like a wolf in church. Bo stepped off the porch, shotgun in hand, just as Hank drew rein. "Well now," Hank said, tipping his hat. "Ain't this cozy?" "You got no business here," Bo said. Hank nodded toward the barn. "Heard you been keeping my girl. She's not yours. She was when I found her. Fed her, clothed her, taught her manners." He spat. "You stole from me." Bo raised the shotgun slightly. "You call it stealing. I call it ending a bad debt." One of Hank's men reached for his pistol. Bo fired. Dust exploded near the horse's hooves. "Next one's in your gut," Bo said, eyes steady. Hank held up a hand. "Easy, friend. Just wanted a civil chat. I'll be back. And next time, it won't be with words." Bo watched them ride off, not lowering the gun until they disappeared behind the ridge. Clara came out of the barn, face pale. "He's not going to stop," she said. "No," Bo agreed. "But neither will I." She stepped close, searching his face. "Why? Why are you fighting for me?" Bo took a breath. "Because you fight for yourself. Because you're worth fighting for." She didn't answer, just reached up and touched his jaw, then turned and walked inside. The next day, Bo taught her to shoot. "You hold it like this," he said, placing the revolver in her hand. "Don't flinch. Don't blink. Aim for the center." She narrowed her eyes, fired, missed, again. By dusk, she hit the bottle on the fence 3 times out of 5. "I ain't scared of him," she said, wiping sweat from her brow. "You should be," Bo said, "but that don't mean you run." That night, they sat by the fire. Bo opened an old box he hadn't touched in years, letters, keepsakes, and at the bottom, a tiny rattle carved from birch. Clara picked it up. "Yours?" Bo nodded. "We were trying. Never happened." She looked at him, and something softened. "I'm not your daughter, Bo. I know. But you treat me like I matter." He swallowed. "You do." The next morning, the barn was in flames. Smoke poured from the rafters. Horses screamed. Clara rushed in with a bucket. Bo grabbed a tarp and beat at the flames. Together, coughing and soaked with sweat, they got the animals out, but the structure collapsed, smoldering ash and cracked beams, all that remained. Bo slumped against the water trough, face streaked with soot. They lit it. Clara sat beside him. "He's trying to scare us." Bo shook his head. "He's trying to take you back." "I won't go," she said, fierce. "You might not have a choice." "I always have a choice." Bo looked at her, really looked, and saw not a girl, but a survivor. Tough as dried leather, and more alive than anything in his broken world. He touched her shoulder. "If he comes back, we fight." She nodded. Together. For a long while, they sat in silence, watching the barn burn down to coals. The sky turned the color of blood and smoke, and somewhere behind the hills, a lone coyote cried. Bo felt the old fear, rising again. The fear of loss. The fear of failing someone he couldn't afford to lose. But when Clara took his hand, he held it. Not as a guardian, not as a savior, but as a man standing beside someone worth standing beside. And as the wind rose through the ashes, carrying sparks into the desert dusk, Bo Ransom knew this fight wasn't just for Clara anymore. It was for both of them. The morning after the fire broke cold and still. Smoke clung to the charred remains of the barn like fog, refusing to lift. Ash settled on everything. Fence posts, porch steps, the water trough, and the land, once merely dry and stubborn, now seemed stripped bare of its last sheltering shade. Bo Ransom stood at the edge of the ruin, a bucket in hand, but there was nothing left to save. Only blackened timber and the smell of ruin. Clara walked up behind him, wrapped in his old wool coat. Her face was soot-streaked, her eyes unreadable. "We'll rebuild," she said, voice raw from smoke and sleep. Bo didn't answer at first. He just stared at the scorched ground. Then he nodded once. "We'll need new timber, and more nails than I've got left." "I'll help," she said. "I know you will." He turned to her, and she was already rolling up her sleeves. That was how it had always been with Clara. She didn't ask for permission. She just stepped up. They worked all that day and into the next, clearing wreckage, salvaging what little the flames had spared. Beau's hands blistered under the leather gloves, and Clara's shoulders ached by sundown, but neither of them slowed. There was a quiet pact between them now, not just of survival, but of something deeper. Shared ground, shared fire. By the third day, Beau noticed Clara limping again. He told her to rest, and she told him to hush. When he pressed her, she gave him a look sharp enough to skin a steer. Still, he worried, not just about her ankle or her stubbornness, but about the storm he knew was coming. Hank Veller wasn't the sort to leave a job half done. Beau had seen men like him during the war, thin-lipped bastards who smiled before they struck and took more pleasure in cruelty than in victory. So Beau started preparing. He pulled out his old Spencer rifle, cleaned it until it gleamed. He sharpened the hatchet, reinforced the door frame, stacked rocks and timber where they could serve as cover if the worst came. Clara helped without asking why. She knew. At dusk, Beau laid out the revolvers on the table and showed her how to reload under pressure. Her hands trembled at first, but steadied after the third round. "You remember what I told you?" he asked, watching her hands. "Center mass," she said. "Don't flinch. Don't blink." He nodded. "If something happens to me..." "Don't," she said sharply. "Just don't." Beau exhaled, rubbed a hand over his jaw. "All right." They slept little that night. Both kept one ear tuned to the wind, every creak of wood sounding like boots on gravel. Clara sat near the hearth with a rifle across her lap. Beau stood by the window, watching the tree line. Just before dawn, the sky began to bruise purple, and the first glint of sun caught the ridge. That's when he saw them. For riders, moving slow but sure, like buzzards circling a carcass. He turned to Clara. "They're here." She rose, quiet as smoke. Beau stepped outside and stood in the yard, his rifle cradled across his arms. Clara followed, planting herself behind the water trough with her revolver steady in both hands. The riders approached without haste. Hank led the pack, wearing a gray duster and a grin like a snake before it strikes. Beside him rode two hired gun strangers, hard eyes, cold smiles. The fourth man held something bundled in canvas. Beau's mouth went dry. He raised his voice. "You come for her?" Hank chuckled. "I come for what's mine. She was never yours. She was under my roof, fed from my plate, worked my floorboards. That makes her mine." Beau's voice didn't rise. "You want to fight?" Hank leaned on his saddle horn. "I want her back. You got till the count of 10 to walk her over nice and quiet." "You count," Beau said, "and you won't make it past 5. Hank's smile vanished. He nodded once, and the guns came forward. The first shot cracked the stillness. Beau dropped to one knee and returned fire. The first rider's hat flew off. Clara fired next, hitting the second man's shoulder. He screamed and dropped his rifle. Chaos erupted. Hank wheeled his horse around, spurred it forward toward the trough. Beau rolled behind a barrel, shot again, and saw the third man fall from his horse like a sack of grain. Then came the crack of Hank's pistol. Beau ducked too late. Pain bloomed across his ribs, hot and sudden. He staggered back, breathing hard. Clara screamed his name and kept firing. One bullet struck Hank's horse in the leg. It reared, and Hank tumbled off, landing hard. Clara was on her feet before he was. She stepped out from behind cover, both hands on the revolver. Hank rose to his knees. "You don't have the guts, girl." "I don't need guts," she said. "I've got enough fire." She pulled the trigger. The bullet hit Hank square in the thigh. He howled and dropped his pistol. Beau, bleeding, limped forward and kicked it away. Then he stood over the man who had haunted Clara's nights for years. "You ride out of here," Beau said, voice ragged, "or I bury you where you fall." Hank, clutching his leg, spat blood into the dirt. "This ain't over." Beau looked him in the eyes. "It is for you." The men who'd survived, one groaning, the other half-conscious, dragged Hank to his feet. They limped to their horses, hurling curses behind them, and rode off without another word. Beau staggered. Clara caught him before he fell. She lowered him gently to the ground, pressing her hand to his side. "Bullet grazed you," she said, trembling. "You'll live." He chuckled weakly. Didn't feel like a graze. She tore strips from her dress hem and wrapped the wound as best she could. Blood soaked through, but it slowed. "You were brave," he said. She smiled through her tears. "You taught me how." Bo looked at her then, really looked, and saw not a girl anymore, but a woman forged by fire, by fight, by grit. She had carved her place in this brutal world with her bare hands, and held it like it was the only thing she'd ever owned. "You don't have to stay," he whispered. "I know," she said, "but I want to." He closed his eyes. "Why?" She looked around them, the broken fence, the scorched barn, the blood-stained dirt, and still, something in her gaze softened. "Because you gave me a choice. No one ever did before." Bo smiled faintly, and for the first time in years, it wasn't shadowed by regret. Later that night, after his wound was stitched and the fire was lit, Clara brought out the old rose bush she'd rescued from a barn fire. The leaves were scorched, the roots dry, but she cradled it like something sacred. Bo watched as she dug a small hole by the porch and planted it beneath the moonlight. "You think it'll grow?" he asked. She nodded. "If it's meant to." He leaned back against the porch rail, breath shallow but steady. "You know," he said, "when I first saw you, I didn't see all this. I just saw trouble." Clara wiped her hands on her skirt. "And now, I see the strongest damn thing on this land." She laughed, but it was soft and real. "That's the first time anyone's ever said that to me. Well, it won't be the last." They sat there in silence for a long time, just listening to the wind, through the scrub and the distant cry of owls. And slowly, the world began to feel whole again. Days turned to weeks. Bo's wound healed with Clara's steady hand and quiet persistence. The barn was rebuilt board by board, and the rose bush sprouted green beneath the porch. The days were hot, the nights full of stars, and the land no longer felt like a burden, but a place being shaped into something that might one day be called home. Clara rode the fence lines now, pistol on her hip, hat pulled low. She spoke little, smiled less, but when she did, it lit up everything like dawn over the mesa. Bo watched her grow, step by step, into the kind of strength he'd long thought lost in the world. And maybe, just maybe, she watched the same in him. One evening, she brought him a letter she'd written. No address, no name, just words. Bo unfolded it with careful fingers. It read, "I was just a bet, a throwaway, but someone saw more than that in me, and in seeing it made it true. So maybe that's all it takes, a moment, a choice, a man brave enough to care, and a girl brave enough to believe him." Bo folded the letter and tucked it into the inside pocket of his coat. Later, he would read it again and again when the nights grew long and quiet. Sometimes he'd sit on the porch, pipe in hand, and think of the way fate had dealt him a hand he never expected. Not a wife, not a child, but something far stranger, far more precious. A second chance, not just for him, but for both of them. And in that wild, unforgiving country where men lived hard and died harder, that was no small thing. So, what do we take from this tale? Maybe it's this: the frontier wasn't just a place, but a crucible. It burned away the lies, the cowardice, the softness. And what survived was real. She was just a bet, but she healed his heart. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. And remember, sometimes the wildest hands deal the truest chances. Clara woke before dawn to the sound of something unnatural, too soft to be wind, too sharp to be nothing. The sky outside was still dark, but her pulse quickened the way it had in that river, in that fire, in every moment since fate had thrown her into Bo Ransom's life like a match into dry brush. She slipped from her cot and grabbed the rifle from beneath it, stepping barefoot across the creaking floorboards. Bo was already up, crouched near the window, eyes fixed on the distant rise. He didn't turn as she approached. "Riders," he murmured. "3 of 'em. Coming from the north this time." Clara followed his gaze. Faint shadows move along the ridge line, barely silhouettes, but the chill in her bones knew them already. Not Hank. He was gone. This was something else. New trouble. She could smell it. Bo handed her a pistol without a word. The weight was familiar now, comforting. Could be nothing, she said, but her voice betrayed her. She didn't believe that. Neither did he. Could be worse, Bo replied. And I don't like the way they ride. Quiet. Careful. Bo had grown harder these past months. Not cruel, never that, but stripped of softness. The scar along his ribs had healed jagged, and the one inside him had done much the same. Still, he was no longer the man who kept the world at arm's length. Clara had seen him smile, heard him hum once, even if he denied it. She wanted that Bo back, the one who had bled for her, who had buried the old ghosts and built a barn from the wreckage. But this wasn't the time for once. Get to the side fence, he said. They might try to split up. Clara nodded and slipped out the back door, boots crunching light on the brittle ground. Her breath misted in the cool air. The morning sun hadn't risen yet, but the desert was already shifting, winds brushing sand into eddies, birds falling silent. She reached the fence line and crouched low. From here, she could see the edge of the property. The riders were closer now. She counted 2 on horseback, 1 on foot leading a 3rd horse. Packs, bedrolls, not a quick strike. Bo was right. This wasn't a raid. This was a siege. They came in without announcing themselves, no waving hats or calling out like neighbors. Just slow, measured steps. One man was older with a hawk-like face and eyes like flint. Another was younger, long and lean, with a rifle slung across his back and a twitch in his jaw. The third wore a wide-brimmed hat that hid most of his face, but Clara caught the glint of something silver at his collar. A martial star. Bo stepped out to meet them, rifle lowered but ready. He called out first, "You're on private land." The older man raised a hand. "We don't mean harm. Name's Merritt. This here's my boy, Luke, and that's Marshal Coy." Bo didn't lower the rifle. Don't see any cause for a federal man to come sniffing around unless he's looking for trouble. Marshal Coy removed his hat. His face was sun-worn and solemn, with deep grooves carved around mouth. "Heard tell you were harboring a fugitive," he said plainly. "A girl, red hair, young." Clara's breath caught. She pressed herself lower in the grass. "Fugitive." Bo's voice was like gravel now. Merritt stepped forward, pulling a folded paper from his coat. "Name's Clara May Winston. Accused of killing Hank Veller in cold blood." Clara froze. The wind suddenly roared in her ears. The moment the gunshot, the blood, the smoke, it all came rushing back. Bo didn't flinch. "That man came to my land to take her. To hurt her. I saw it all. So did she. It was self-defense." Marshal Coy nodded. "Could be. But I'm still bound to bring her in. Let the courts sort it." Bo stepped closer. "You won't touch her." Luke, the younger man, tensed. His hand hovered near his revolver. "You sure you want to turn this into something ugly?" Coy asked. Bo's eyes never left his. "You'll have to go through me." It all broke in a blink. Luke fired first. A crack and flash. Bo twisted and fired back. His bullet caught Luke in the thigh. The young man screamed and dropped to one knee. Clara rose from cover and fired twice. One bullet buried in the dirt. The other struck Merritt in the shoulder. He staggered, shocked, as Coy dove for cover behind a rock. Bo rushed to Clara, grabbed her arm, pulled her back toward the house. "Inside," he barked. "Now!" Bullets peppered the barn as they dove through the doorway. Wood splintered. Clay pots shattered. Clara was panting, fingers trembling. "He's a marshal, Bo. He can hang me." "He won't," Bo said. "I won't let him." "You can't stop the law." Bo locked eyes with her. "Then we make our own." He moved to the window, returned fire. Coy was pinned behind the trough, trying to drag Luke with him. Merritt had vanished behind the barn's far wall. "They'll wait us out," Clara said. "They've got supplies." "Then we break the wait," Bo growled. "We end it now." He rummaged through the cabinet, pulled out an old satchel. Inside, 2 sticks of dynamite wrapped in oiled cloth. "Jesus," Clara whispered. "Where'd you get that?" "Traded for it a long time ago. Meant to use it on tree stumps. Never did." Bo lit a match, held it to the fuse, and counted. "Cover me," he said, opening the door. Clara fired twice, forcing Coy to duck. Bo ran low and fast, lobbing the bundle over the trough. It landed with a dull thump. Then it blew. The explosion rocked the ground, sending Coy and Luke sprawling. Dirt and flame geysered into the sky. Clara shielded her face. When the smoke cleared, only Merritt remained standing, half-blinded, staggering toward the house. He fired. The bullet grazed Clara's side. She cried out, but stayed on her feet. Fired back. Missed. Bo stepped into the doorway, leveled his rifle, and fired once. Merritt dropped. The silence afterward was total. No more shouting. No more gunfire. Bo moved carefully, rifle raised, toward Coy. The marshal groaned, alive but bloodied. "It's over," Bo said. Coy nodded. "She'll still have to stand trial. She'll testify. So will I." Coy looked up at Clara, who clutched her bleeding arm, her eyes hard but clear. "She saved me," Bo said. "And you know what that man Hank was. Everyone in town did. She just did what no one else dared." Coy wiped blood from his lip, considered. "You get her to town in 3 days," he said. "I'll see to it she gets a fair hearing." Bo offered a hand. Coy took it, wincing. They buried Merritt on the edge of the property. Luke would live, but he wouldn't ride for weeks. Coy and the boy left that night, leaving behind dust, burned ground, and the promise of justice not yet won. Back inside, Bo stitched Clara's arm while she hissed and cursed. "You didn't have to come out shooting," she said through gritted teeth. "You'd have done the same." She smiled despite the pain. "Guess you've rubbed off on me." He tied off the bandage. "Guess we've rubbed off on each other." Later, after the fire had been rekindled and the dead scrubbed from the floor, they sat in silence. "You scared?" Bo asked. "Of court?" Clara shook her head. "No, I did what I had to. I'll tell it true." Bo watched the flames flicker in her eyes. "You're not that same girl I won." "No," she said softly. "And you're not the man who won me." He reached over and took her hand. "You still got a choice, Clara. If you want to walk away, after this." She squeezed his fingers. "I didn't have a choice. That's why I'm still here." He nodded, the weight of everything they'd endured pressing against his ribs. But inside that weight was something else now. Not fear, not guilt, but pride and hope. As the stars emerged above the desert, bold and unashamed, the land around them felt changed. No longer a place they'd fought to survive, but one they could finally begin to live in. And far off in the dark, the sound of night birds rose. Not a warning, not a threat, but a song. The song of something ending and something better beginning.